WNBA finals, and so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. I'm a human too. I have a family. I have 2 kids who are devastated by these comments, and so all I'll say is just, it's obviously been a...
The basketball world just witnessed something it's never seen before. A commissioner made a choice that's sending shockwaves through every arena, every locker room, and every social media platform in professional sports. This isn't about a fine. It's not about a suspension or a warning. According to reports circulating through league insiders, the WNBA just removed one of its greatest champions from representing her country. The reigning MVP, the face of a dynasty. The player who carried women's basketball through years of struggle. Gone. And the reason why reveals a conflict that goes way deeper than what you've heard on ESPN. 2 of the league's biggest stars are now at the center of a controversy that's tearing apart everything the WNBA claimed to stand for. One represents the past. One represents the future. And the commissioner decided only one of them could stay. But before you pick a side, you need to understand what really happened behind closed doors, why the league's leadership made this decision, and what it means for the sport moving forward. Because this story isn't just about basketball. It's about money, power, race, and what happens when a league chooses growth over loyalty. The moment Kathy Engelbert made her decision public, the basketball world stopped. Not paused, stopped completely. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has reportedly confirmed that A'ja Wilson, the Las Vegas Aces 2-time champion and reigning MVP, has been officially removed from Team USA responsibilities and suspended from league activities. Let that sink in for a second. This is A'ja Wilson we're talking about, the player who's played some of the best basketball of her entire career this season. The franchise cornerstone who helped transform the Las Vegas Aces from a struggling team into one of the most dominant forces in women's sports history. For years, Wilson carried the WNBA on her shoulders. When the ratings were low, when the arenas weren't packed, when sponsors were questioning their investments, she was there. Playing with professionalism, speaking for the league, representing women's basketball at the highest levels. She's won championships. She's been an MVP. She's been the face that held the league together through some of its toughest years. And now, according to these reports, that's all allegedly over. But this isn't just about removing a player from the roster. This is about what that removal represents. According to reports circulating through league insiders, Kathy Engelbert was forced to choose between the league's past and its future. On one side stood a proven champion with a legacy that defined the modern WNBA. On the other side stood a generational talent whose arrival had transformed the entire landscape of women's basketball almost overnight. The commissioner chose the future. And in doing so, she made a statement that's going to echo through women's sports for years to come. What makes this decision so unprecedented is how the league went about it. This wasn't a quiet conversation or a behind-the-scenes negotiation. According to the reports, this was a calculated move made by the league office to send a message to every single team, every single player, and every single fan that protecting the league's biggest star comes before loyalty to its veterans. It's a power move. A statement that the old rules don't apply anymore. That legacy doesn't guarantee protection, that if you become a problem for the league's future, you become expendable. The official reasons provided by the commissioner's office focus on what's being described as an incident involving both Wilson and Clark. But the details are murky, intentionally vague, and shrouded in the kind of secrecy usually reserved for national security briefings. According to sources cited in these reports, there was an altercation. A physical confrontation. Something that happened away from the cameras, away from the media, away from everyone except the people involved and the league officials who eventually found out about it. The league feared going public with full details. They worried that the specifics could damage both players' reputations. They were concerned about legal ramifications. They were nervous about how it would play with sponsors. And most importantly, they were terrified about what it would mean for the league's image if it became widely known that their biggest star had a serious conflict with their franchise player. So instead of handling it quietly, they did something even more dramatic. They made a public statement that confirmed the worst suspicions while refusing to explain the actual details. This created a vacuum, And in that vacuum, rumors filled the space. According to reports from league insiders, what allegedly happened in that tunnel went beyond trash talk. It went beyond the typical physical play that happens in women's basketball. According to these sources, it was a confrontation that required security personnel to intervene. It was intense enough that video footage was captured. It was serious enough that legal representatives got involved. It was damaging enough that the commissioner felt compelled to take action that would normally be unthinkable. For decades, the WNBA operated on an unspoken code. Veterans protected the league. They mentored rookies. They handled conflicts internally. They dealt with tension through the natural order of on-court competition and locker room dynamics. The commissioner didn't step in and remove the league's biggest stars. That wasn't how it worked. That's not how it worked in the NBA. That's not how it worked in any major professional league. But according to these reports, Kathy Engelbert decided that this situation was different, that the stakes were too high, that the future of the league depended on her making a choice that would fundamentally alter the power structure of women's basketball. What happened next was telling. The WNBA Players Association, normally vocal and quick to defend their members, went silent. Not a press release, not a formal statement, not even a quiet comment to the media. Just silence. According to reports from league observers, that silence spoke volumes. Either the players knew exactly what happened and didn't want to publicly defend it, or they understood the league's position and recognized that fighting back would be futile. Either way, the lack of pushback from the union gave the commissioner cover to make her decision stick. The timing was also strategic. According to these reports, the league waited until the off-season to make the announcement. They wanted to bury it beneath the noise of the summer, hoping it would fade from headlines before the next season started. But what they didn't anticipate was how explosive this would become, how it would reveal the fault lines running through women's basketball, how it would expose the tensions that had been building all season long, because this wasn't about one incident in a tunnel. It was about everything leading up to that moment. The story of what allegedly happened in that tunnel is the kind of narrative that would be dismissed as fiction if it wasn't coming from multiple credible sources within the league. According to these reports, the tension had been building all season. Every time Caitlin Clark took the court, the physical play intensified. Hip checks, hard fouls, screens that bordered on illegal, trash talk that went beyond what's normally acceptable. It was the kind of treatment that new players sometimes get in professional sports, a rite of passage designed to test whether they belong. But according to sources cited in these reports, what was happening to Clark went beyond the standard welcome to the league. It was targeted. It was coordinated. It was allegedly intentional intimidation designed to send a message that this rookie, no matter how talented, no matter how hyped, wasn't going to be treated like the face of the franchise until she'd earned it the old way. Through years of grinding. Through seasons of proving herself. Through the kind of suffering that made the veterans feel like their sacrifices meant something. The physical play reached a crescendo over the course of the season, but it was one particular moment, according to these reports, that became the catalyst for everything that followed. It happened after a game, away from the broadcast cameras, away from the media, away from the thousands of fans still filing out of the arena. In the tunnel that connects the locker rooms, where players walk in relative privacy, something allegedly went down that changed everything. According to sources describing what happened, the altercation was more than just heated words. It allegedly involved physical contact. According to these reports, Aja Wilson allegedly became confrontational with Caitlin Clark. The details are intentionally vague, protected by the league's refusal to disclose specifics, but descriptions from insiders suggest it went far beyond a typical locker room dispute. It was allegedly aggressive. It allegedly required intervention. And according to these reports, it was allegedly captured on video. Modern sports arenas are equipped with cameras everywhere. Security cameras in corridors, tunnel cameras for safety purposes, video equipment monitoring player movements. In the age of smartphones, there's almost nowhere that's truly private. According to these reports, the alleged confrontation between Wilson and Clark was recorded. Video footage allegedly showed one of the league's biggest stars allegedly attempting to physically intimidate its newest superstar. That footage allegedly made its way to the league office. And once it arrived, it allegedly forced Commissioner Kathy Engelbert into the most difficult decision of her tenure. What exactly does the video allegedly show? The specifics remain confidential, protected by legal concerns and sponsorship considerations. But according to sources citing descriptions from people who have allegedly seen it, the footage allegedly depicts a moment of genuine hostility. Not the kind of normal conflict you'd see between competitors, but something that, if made public, would damage both players' reputations and potentially expose the league to criticism about player safety and professional standards. The league's reaction was immediate and severe. According to these reports, officials recognized that this incident represented a breaking point, not just between two players, but between the old power structure of the WNBA and the new reality of the league's commercialization. The video footage was like a match dropped into gasoline. If it became public, the league knew that the narrative would spiral out of their control. Questions would be asked, investigations would be demanded, sponsors would panic, and worst of all for league leadership, it would expose a reality that they'd been trying to manage quietly all season long. According to these reports, legal representatives for Caitlin Clark allegedly reached out to the league office expressing concerns about player safety. This is a crucial detail because it gave the commissioner legal and ethical justification for action. It wasn't just about managing two players. It was about establishing that the league was taking player safety seriously. It was about protecting its franchise player from what could reasonably be described as harassment or intimidation. It was about drawing a line and saying that this behavior would not be tolerated. But here's where it gets complicated. According to these reports, Aja Wilson wasn't the only player engaging in physical play directed at Caitlin Clark. Multiple players had contributed to the hostile environment. Multiple teammates had participated in what some were describing as coordinated intimidation. Yet according to these reports, it was Wilson who allegedly crossed the line. Wilson who allegedly became physical in a way that justified league intervention. Wilson, whose status as the league's biggest veteran made her removal a powerful statement about what the future of the WNBA was going to look like. The tunnel incident became the justification the commissioner needed. According to these reports, once the video footage was delivered to the league office, once concerns about player safety were formally raised, once the legal implications became clear, Kathy Engelbert had her reason to act. She could frame this as a necessary step to protect the league's stars. She could present it as a commitment to maintaining professional standards. She could make the case that removing Wilson wasn't about picking sides between two players. It was about protecting the future of women's basketball itself. But Wilson's perspective was allegedly very different. According to these reports, she believed she was being punished for what every veteran player had allegedly been doing all season. She believed she was being made a scapegoat. She believed the league was choosing its new darling over its proven champion. And most painfully, she allegedly believed that everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd given to the WNBA meant nothing compared to one rookie's marketability and potential. To truly understand what allegedly happened in that tunnel, you have to go back months earlier, back to the Paris Olympics, back to the moment when Caitlin Clark's name was noticeably absent from Team USA's roster announcement. According to reports from that time, the selection committee cited 3 reasons for leaving Clark off the team: defensive liability, chemistry concerns, lack of experience. On the surface, these explanations made sense. Clark was a rookie. She hadn't played international competition at that level, and her defensive capabilities were still developing. The official reasoning seemed reasonable. But according to sources now cited in these reports, there was another reason entirely. A reason that nobody was saying out loud. A reason that was being communicated in hushed conversations among veteran players and coaching staff. According to these sources, the veterans on that selection committee allegedly didn't want Clark in Paris, and the reasons had nothing to do with basketball ability. They allegedly had to do with control, with power, with the hierarchy of women's basketball and who got to sit at the top. Reports at the time suggested tension around Clark's inclusion. Some analysts and commentators speculated that there was something deeper going on beneath the surface, but most people accepted the official explanation. Clark was young. She needed more time. She'd get another chance in 4 years. It seemed like a reasonable decision. According to these current reports, it was actually something much more calculated. It was allegedly a preventative measure designed to avoid exactly the kind of conflict that eventually erupted in that tunnel. Think about it from the perspective of the veteran players. According to these reports, stars like Aja Wilson had spent years building the WNBA. They'd played in small arenas. They'd dealt with minimal sponsorship opportunities. They'd sacrificed their earning potential to build the league into something respectable. Then suddenly, Caitlin Clark arrives and the entire landscape changes overnight. The attention shifts. The money increases. The sponsorships multiply. The narrative becomes about the future instead of the foundation that beside them on the world stage. If she had the opportunity to prove herself against the best players in the world, it would only accelerate her status and increase the gap in marketability between the veterans and this rookie. So according to sources describing the selection committee's thinking, they allegedly made a choice. They allegedly kept her home, not because she wasn't talented enough, but because they allegedly wanted to maintain control of the narrative and the hierarchy of women's basketball. The official language around the snub spoke about chemistry concerns, but according to these reports, that was code for something else entirely. According to insiders, what they really meant was that the veterans didn't trust this newcomer, that they didn't want her presence disrupting their Olympic experience, that they were protecting their space and their status from what they allegedly saw as a threat. The chemistry concerns were allegedly about the culture they'd built. The culture that suddenly felt threatened by someone who could overshadow all of them. For months, this reasoning stayed quiet. The Clark snub became a talking point for analysts, but most people eventually moved on. The Olympics happened. Team USA won gold. Life continued. But according to these reports, the tension didn't disappear. It just moved from the international stage back to the WNBA, because keeping Clark off the Olympic roster didn't solve the fundamental problem. It just delayed it. It bought the veterans a few months of breathing room. It postponed the inevitable collision between the old guard and the new reality of women's basketball. When the WNBA season started, all of that tension came flooding back. According to these reports, every player on every team knew what had allegedly happened in Paris. They knew that the veterans had allegedly orchestrated keeping Clark off that roster. They understood the message it sent. They recognized the power play for what it was. And according to sources describing the atmosphere around the league, it created a toxic environment where physical play against Clark became almost sanctioned, where intimidation became a way to reinforce the message from Paris, where the veterans allegedly sent a signal that they were still in control, regardless of how much money the rookie brought in. The tension built throughout the season, game after game, week after week. According to these reports, the physical play intensified, the hard fouls increased, the apparent targeting of Clark became more obvious to anyone paying attention. But unlike the Olympics, where the selection committee could make decisions behind closed doors, the WNBA season played out in front of millions of viewers. Every foul was watched. Every physical video footage allegedly showed exactly what they'd been allowing to happen all season long. According to these sources, that tunnel incident wasn't random. It was the inevitable conclusion of a conflict that had been brewing since Paris. It was the moment when months of tension allegedly exploded into a confrontation that the league could no longer ignore or manage quietly. The Olympic snub had set everything in motion. According to these reports, by keeping Clark off that roster, the veterans had allegedly created the conditions for the very conflict they were trying to prevent. Because instead of establishing dominance through inclusion and proving they could coexist with the rookie at the highest level, they'd allegedly made it clear that they viewed her as a threat. And once that message was sent, once that line was drawn, the rest was allegedly inevitable. If you want to truly understand why Commissioner Kathy Engelbert made the decision she did, you have to follow the money. Because in professional sports, money is the ultimate language. It's the reason decisions get made. It's the reason certain players get protected while others get sacrificed. It's the reason the commissioner allegedly chose Caitlin Clark over Aja Wilson, despite Wilson being the more accomplished, more proven, more experienced player. Before Caitlin Clark arrived, the WNBA was struggling financially. Not dramatically failing, but struggling. The league was heavily subsidized by the NBA. It relied on the parent organization's infrastructure and financial support to stay afloat. Arenas weren't full. Television ratings were modest at best. Sponsorship deals were smaller than they should have been. Private charter flights were a luxury that only the most valuable teams could sometimes afford. The league was in a precarious position where its continued existence depended on the NBA's willingness to keep funding it and investors' belief that it would eventually grow into something more profitable. Then Caitlin Clark entered the draft, and according to reports analyzing the financial impact of her arrival, something unprecedented happened in women's sports. Suddenly, every city was selling out. When the Indiana Fever came to town, arenas filled up. Television ratings skyrocketed. Media networks began bidding for broadcasting rights at prices that were exponentially higher than what they'd been willing to pay before. Sponsorship deals multiplied. Merchandise flew off the shelves. Private charter flights became a reality for every single team in the league, not just the elite franchises. The financial momentum that Clark generated was transformational. According to analysts examining the numbers, her impact on the WNBA's commercial viability had been estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. She didn't just attract existing basketball fans, she attracted a completely new audience. Casual viewers, people who'd never followed women's basketball before. Families, young girls who suddenly saw themselves represented on a professional stage. The demographic shift was massive. Now imagine you're Kathy Engelbert. Imagine you're looking at these numbers. Imagine you're seeing the potential for growth that Caitlin Clark represents. And imagine you're also seeing that same player being physically targeted, intimidated, and according to reports, allegedly confronted in a tunnel by the league's most accomplished veteran. From a purely business perspective, the math becomes very simple. A'ja Wilson is a proven superstar. She's an incredible player. She has built her legacy over years of dedication and excellence, but her marketability is relatively stable. Her earning potential is already realized. The trajectory of her career is known. What she brings to the league has already been quantified and monetized. She's valuable, but her value isn't growing exponentially the way Clark's value is. Caitlin Clark, on the other hand, represents growth. She represents untapped potential. She represents an entire new audience that the WNBA can monetize for the next decade or more. According to reports analyzing the commissioner's thinking, Engelbert allegedly viewed her as an insurance policy for the league's future. If Clark became seriously injured because of physical play in the league, the growth might stop. If she became frustrated with the constant targeting and harassment and decided to retire early, the momentum would disappear. If sponsorships were jeopardized because she was being mistreated, the financial foundation would crack. According to these reports, that's why Engelbert made the choice she did. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about determining who was right or wrong in the tunnel incident. It was about protecting the league's greatest financial asset. According to sources describing the commissioner's reasoning, she allegedly concluded that the risk of losing Caitlin Clark was exponentially greater than the cost of removing A'ja Wilson. This is where it gets brutal. According to these reports, Wilson was allegedly sacrificed on the altar of growth. She became a means to an end. A message sent to every player in the league that protecting the star asset comes before protecting the veterans. A signal that the old power structure was being dismantled in favor of a new paradigm where financial viability trumps legacy and loyalty. Consider the sponsorship angle. Both players were sponsored by Nike. Nike had a vested interest in both athletes, but according to these reports, Clark represented the future. A white rookie with massive market appeal, tremendous college brand recognition, and crossover appeal beyond traditional basketball fans. Wilson represented the past. An accomplished black champion with deep roots in basketball culture, but less mainstream marketability in the demographic that Nike was increasingly targeting. According to these reports, Nike faced a potential crisis if the incident between the two players became public and damaged Clark's reputation. If video footage showed her being physically intimidated by Wilson, it could impact her endorsement value and marketability. But if Wilson's reputation took the hit instead, if she became known as the player who allegedly couldn't handle competition from a rookie and allegedly resorted to physical intimidation, her sponsorship value would be protected far less than Clark's. The commissioner allegedly understood this calculus. She understood that Nike would be more willing to pressure her to protect Clark than to protect Wilson. She understood that the new money in women's basketball came from the demographic that Clark attracted, not the traditional basketball audience that had supported Wilson. She understood that sacrificing one to protect the other was, from a purely financial standpoint, the right business decision. According to these reports, Kathy Engelbert made a choice that prioritized the league's financial future over the dignity of its greatest player. She made a choice that said legacy means less than growth potential. She made a choice that fundamentally altered the power dynamic in women's basketball, and she made that choice because the numbers told her it was the right one. The moment the commissioner's decision became public, women's sports fractured into two distinct camps, not just disagreeing, absolutely divided. According to reports from social media analysts tracking the response, the fanbase split almost instantly along generational, demographic, and ideological lines. And what emerged was something larger than just a disagreement about one player's suspension. It became a full-scale culture war about the identity and future of women's basketball itself. On one side emerged the legacy fans. These are the people who have been supporting the WNBA since its founding in 1997. They sat through the low ratings. They attended games in half-empty arenas. They bought tickets and merchandise even when nobody on television was paying attention to women's basketball. These fans have a deep emotional investment in the league's history and in the players who built it from nothing. According to reports describing their reaction, they were furious. They felt betrayed. These legacy fans saw A'ja Wilson as the embodiment of everything they'd supported. She wasn't just a talented player. She represented the struggle. She represented the journey of building something meaningful from a place of relative obscurity. According to sources describing their perspective, they viewed her removal as an act of profound disrespect. They believed she was being made a scapegoat for conflicts that involved multiple players. They were outraged that the league would sacrifice its greatest player to protect a rookie, no matter how talented that rookie was. According to reports analyzing the sentiment in legacy fan communities, many of them began expressing intentions to cancel season tickets. They talked about boycotting merchandise. They discussed leaving the league and taking their support elsewhere. The sense of abandonment was real and visceral. According to sources citing conversations in fan forums, they felt like the WNBA was telling them that their years of loyalty meant nothing, that the sport they'd supported through the difficult years didn't need them anymore, that the league had found new fans with more money and less history, and the old guard was being pushed out. And then there was the racial dimension, which according to reports was impossible to ignore. Here was a black superstar being removed to protect a white rookie. Here was a commissioner making a decision that, whether intentionally or not, had the effect of elevating a white player and diminishing a black one. According to sources analyzing the response from communities focused on racial justice, the optics were devastating. The narrative felt familiar in a way that made people deeply uncomfortable. According to reports describing conversations in Black feminist spaces online, many saw this as a reflection of broader patterns in American society, where Black women do the foundational work, build something meaningful, and then get pushed aside when white women or women in sports had been fighting against for decades. On the other side of this divide emerged the new wave of fans. These are the millions of people who discovered women's basketball because of Caitlin Clark, young fans, casual viewers, people from outside traditional basketball culture who had been drawn in by the hype and the energy surrounding the rookie. According to reports analyzing their response, many of them were celebrating the commissioner's decision. They saw it as justice. They saw it as the league finally saying enough to what they perceived as a toxic environment. These new fans had a different perspective on the physical play and the conflicts between Wilson and Clark. According to sources describing their viewpoint, they didn't see it as the normal hazing of a rookie. They saw it as bullying. They saw it as jealousy from players who resented being overshadowed by someone younger and more talented. They viewed the removal of Wilson as the league finally making a statement that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated anymore. According to reports, they believed the commissioner was trying to make the league more professional, more welcoming, and more focused on basketball than on maintaining hierarchies. The cultural divide went deeper than just disagreement about the incident or the decision. According to reports analyzing the broader themes emerging in fan conversations, it reflected a fundamental question about what the WNBA was going to be. Was it going to remain a league rooted in the traditions of Black women in basketball, in the struggle and solidarity that had defined it for decades? Or was it going to evolve into something that prioritized commercial growth and mainstream appeal, even if that meant leaving behind the fans and players who'd been there from the beginning? According to reports tracking social media conversations, the divide was becoming toxic. According to sources citing specific examples, legacy fans were making racially charged arguments about maintaining the integrity of the league. New fans were making arguments that bordered on gaslighting, suggesting that anyone who supported Wilson was defending toxic behavior. Personal attacks multiplied. Bad faith arguments proliferated. The two sides seemed incapable of even having a conversation, let alone finding common ground. The coaching staff found itself drawn into the conflict. Cheryl Reeve, who had been one of the most outspoken critics of the Caitlin Clark hype all season and who had played a role in the decision to leave Clark off the Olympic roster, suddenly became a target. According to reports analyzing her position, her authority had been undermined by the commissioner's decision. If the league was making moves that contradicted the coaching staff's vision and strategy, what did that say about the coach's actual power and influence? According to sources describing the atmosphere within coaching circles, there was speculation that more changes might be coming. Some believed coaches who'd opposed the narrative the league was now pushing. According to these reports, the message being sent was one of complete control from the top, regardless of the consequences for everyone else. The question everyone was asking after the commissioner's decision was simple: what happens next? For the Las Vegas Aces, the answer was complicated and potentially devastating. According to reports analyzing the situation with the franchise, the Aces were facing an unprecedented crisis. They'd been back-to-back champions. They'd set the standard in the WNBA. They'd built a dynasty. And now, according to these reports, their franchise player was allegedly at odds with the league that employed her. Aces owner Mark Davis is known for valuing loyalty. He's someone who builds around his stars and commits to them. He stands by his players through controversy. But according to reports describing the pressure on Davis, he was now allegedly caught between two competing loyalties: support his franchise player and her perspective, or accept the league's new direction and move forward without her. According to sources describing conversations within the organization, the tension was palpable. What would a Ja Wilson do? According to reports analyzing her likely options, she had several paths forward. She could accept the suspension and attempt to rehabilitate her reputation, though according to sources close to the situation, doing so would require her to essentially accept that she'd done something wrong, which allegedly wasn't how she viewed the situation. She could fight publicly, defending herself and exposing what she believed were the league's unfair practices, or she could look elsewhere. According to reports from overseas basketball leagues, Wilson was receiving enormous offers. Russia, Spain, Turkey, professional leagues in Europe and Asia that would pay her millions to play basketball without the controversy surrounding her in the WNBA. According to sources analyzing her situation, the financial incentive to leave the United States was tremendous. She could go to Europe, play at an extremely high level, earn millions, and escape the toxicity that now surrounded her in the WNBA. Some reports suggested she was seriously considering it. But what would that mean for the WNBA itself? According to analysts examining the implications, losing a Ja Wilson would be a massive blow to the league's credibility and talent level. Imagine, according to these reports, if the NBA had banned LeBron James. Imagine if the league decided it needed to remove one of its greatest players to protect a rookie. It would be unthinkable. Yet here was women's basketball, allegedly, in a position where its reigning MVP was being forced out of the league, because she allegedly conflicted with a more marketable player. According to reports analyzing the potential outcomes, the league was effectively betting everything on Caitlin Clark's ability to single-handedly carry women's basketball into the future. They were saying, according to these sources, that Clark's presence and appeal was enough to offset the loss of Wilson and the alienation of legacy fans. It was an extraordinarily risky calculation. According to analysts examining precedent in professional sports, there weren't many examples of leagues successfully removing their best players and thriving afterward. But what about Clark herself? According to reports analyzing her position, her situation was more complicated than many realized. She was being positioned as the winner, as the player who'd been protected by league leadership. But according to sources describing the reality of her situation, she'd actually inherited a massive target on her back. She now entered every arena knowing that every other player held her responsible for their leader's downfall. The fouls would become harder, according to these reports. The screens would become more physical. The trash talk would intensify. The targeting that had allegedly occurred before the suspension would pale in comparison to what was allegedly coming. According to sources familiar with locker room dynamics, Wilson's removal wouldn't solve the conflict. It would allegedly exacerbate it. It would allegedly turn Clark into a villain in the eyes of many players, regardless of whether any of this was actually her fault. According to reports analyzing her mental state, Clark hadn't asked for this. She hadn't orchestrated Wilson's removal. She'd simply been a talented rookie trying to play basketball in a league that suddenly became extremely interested in women's sports because of her arrival. And now, according to these sources, she was allegedly being blamed for the destruction of women's sports culture by the removal of one of its greatest players. The pressure was reportedly enormous. The league may have actually increased her risk on the court by trying to protect her, according to these reports. By making it obvious that she was being shielded, by removing the player whose alleged confrontation with her had triggered the commissioner's action, the league had allegedly made Clark the focus of resentment throughout the league. She was no longer just a talented rookie. She was now the teacher's pet. The class president who got the class president who'd been expelled. And wearing that label while competing in such a physical sport was dangerous. According to reports from other teams, there was already an underlying tension about how to approach Clark in games. Some teams were apparently asking themselves if they should increase the physical play against her, essentially continuing what Wilson had allegedly been doing, but in a coordinated way across the league. According to sources describing conversations within teams, there was a sense that the commissioner's decision had allegedly opened the door for this kind of behavior by showing that she would protect Clark at any cost. Some allegedly interpreted that as permission to continue testing her. The Las Vegas Aces themselves were in a precarious position, according to these reports. They'd been built around Wilson. The offense flowed through her. The defense was anchored by her. The entire identity of the franchise was built on her presence. Now, without her, according to reports from analysts examining the roster, the team faced a significant decline. According to sources describing the situation, this could be the beginning of the end of the Aces' dominance. Some speculation suggested a potential trade, according to these reports. Mark Davis might be willing to explore options if Wilson wanted out or if the league was pushing him to move her. According to sources in the league office, there was discussion about what teams might be willing to take on a controversial superstar. But according to reports analyzing the realistic options, very few teams would want to deal with the baggage allegedly attached to Wilson at this moment. The question that very few people were asking out loud, but which allegedly consumed the attention of lawyers and league officials, was this: did the commissioner follow proper procedures? Did Aja Wilson receive due process? According to reports from legal analysts examining the situation, the silence from the WNBA Players Association was suspicious. Not because they were accepting the decision, but because they were reportedly consulting with attorneys, preparing for a potential legal battle that could expose everything. According to sources familiar with legal strategy in professional sports, the Players Association likely wouldn't respond publicly until they'd fully understood the league's documentation, the evidence they allegedly had, and the procedures they'd followed. If there was a process violation, if proper protocols hadn't been observed, if the league acted arbitrarily or without cause, then a lawsuit would be not just justified but potentially devastating to the league. And according to these sources, that's likely exactly what was being discussed behind closed doors. According to reports analyzing the potential discovery process in any Wilson v. WNBA lawsuit, everything could come out. Text messages, emails, video footage, the alleged tunnel incident tape, communications between the commissioner's office and team officials, discussions about financial considerations, conversations about which players mattered most to the league's future. All of it would allegedly be subject to discovery. All of it would be dragged into the light. According to legal experts cited in these reports, the league may have believed it was sealing the lid by making this decision and moving on. Instead, according to these sources, they may have opened Pandora's box. Once litigation started, once attorneys began requesting documents, once depositions were scheduled, the league would lose the ability to control the narrative. Everything would be exposed. And according to these reports, some of that information would be deeply damaging to the league's credibility. The timing of these alleged legal discussions was crucial, according to these reports. The Players' Association wasn't silent because they were weak. They were silent because they were building a case. According to sources describing the strategic thinking, they were allegedly gathering evidence, documenting violations, building a record of unfair treatment. And they were allegedly waiting for the right moment to strike. But the legal complications extended beyond potential litigation. According to reports analyzing the situation, the upcoming collective bargaining agreement negotiations were already becoming contentious because of this decision. The current CBA was approaching its expiration date, and players were supposed to have significant leverage in renegotiating their compensation. With the additional television revenue that Caitlin Clark had generated, players were expecting substantially larger raises. They were expecting increased salary caps. They were expecting a genuine increase in their share of league revenue. But according to reports from sources familiar with CBA negotiations, the league's decision to remove Wilson had allegedly complicated those discussions dramatically. According to these sources, the owners were now apparently using the situation as a negotiating point. They were allegedly arguing that the league remained financially fragile, that controversial decisions and potential litigation were creating uncertainty, that players needed to be reasonable with their demands because the league's future stability was uncertain. According to reports analyzing the potential outcomes, the CBA negotiations were shaping up to be a bloodbath. The players would be demanding more money and better protections. The league would be arguing about uncertainty and controversy. The Players' Association would be simultaneously pursuing litigation against the commissioner while trying to negotiate a new contract with the same league office. It was an extraordinarily difficult position to be in, according to these sources. And there was a darker possibility lurking beneath the surface. According to reports from labor experts examining the situation, this decision could potentially trigger a strike or lockout. If the Players' Association determined that the league had acted in bad faith, that it had violated contractual obligations, that it had engaged in unfair treatment of its players, they could allegedly recommend that players refuse to play. According to these sources, a work stoppage was not beyond the realm of possibility. Imagine the implications, according to these reports. The WNBA finally has momentum, finally has interest, finally has the media attention and sponsorship deals that it's been fighting for. And suddenly, there's a strike. Games are canceled. The season is interrupted. The golden moment of growth that Caitlin Clark had allegedly created is disrupted by labor strife. According to these sources, the irony would be devastating. According to analysts examining the situation, the league had allegedly made a decision designed to protect its future that might actually destroy it. The sponsorship situation was also reportedly becoming complicated. According to reports from sources familiar with corporate partnerships, Nike, Gatorade, and other major sponsors were in difficult positions. They'd all jumped on the women's basketball boom because of the Caitlin Clark effect. But now they were allegedly worried about being associated with a league in turmoil. According to sources describing sponsor conversations, some were allegedly questioning their commitment levels if the league remained embroiled in controversy and potentially legal battles. According to reports analyzing the broader business implications, The commissioner's decision was allegedly backfiring in ways that extended far beyond the simple removal of one player. By making a decision that was so controversial, by creating such a stark division among fans, by leaving herself vulnerable to legal action. According to these sources, Kathy Engelbert had allegedly jeopardized the very growth she was trying to protect. The media's role in all of this was also being examined, according to these reports. For months, according to sources analyzing coverage patterns, ESPN, YouTube analysts, and other media outlets had been feeding the conflict between Clark and Wilson. They'd analyzed every foul. They'd scrutinized every look. They'd created a narrative of rivalry that allegedly distorted the actual dynamic between the two players. According to these sources, the media had allegedly pushed the commissioner toward taking action by making the conflict seem more serious than it was. And now, according to reports from media analysts, some were questioning whether the commissioner had acted in a vacuum or whether she'd been responding to overwhelming media pressure to address what the media itself had created. It was a complicated situation where responsibility allegedly extended far beyond just the league office and into the media ecosystem that allegedly fueled the conflict. What started as a story about one player's suspension has evolved into something much larger. According to reports analyzing the broader implications of the commissioner's decision, this is about the fundamental identity of the WNBA and what it's becoming. It's about whether the league will remain rooted in the community and culture that built it, or whether it will transform into something entirely different in pursuit of growth and mainstream acceptance. According to sources describing the emotional reality behind these abstractions, Black women created the WNBA. They fought for it. They sacrificed for it. They played in front of small crowds and minimal sponsorship. They built the league from absolute nothing into something that could eventually attract mainstream attention and investment. The foundational players, the ones who carried the league through its struggle years, were predominantly Black women who did this work with relative anonymity and minimal financial reward. Then, according to reports analyzing the narrative shift, Caitlin Clark arrived. And according to these sources, her arrival was framed by mainstream media as a savior moment. As if the league hadn't existed or mattered before she showed up. As if the years of work by Black women players hadn't created the foundation that made Clark's arrival possible. According to sources describing reactions in Black basketball communities, this reframing felt like erasure. It felt like the contributions of Black women were being rewritten out of the history of the league they'd built. And now, according to reports analyzing the racial dynamics at play, the commissioner had allegedly reinforced that narrative by removing a Black superstar to protect a white rookie. Whether that was the intention, according to these sources, the effect was devastating. It sent a message that the league valued the future it imagined with Clark more than it valued the women who'd built the present. It sent a message that growth and mainstream appeal trumped loyalty and gratitude to the people who'd made that growth possible. According to sources in sociology and sports history, this moment might be studied for decades to come. The decision by Kathy Engelbert would likely become a case study in how institutions allegedly abandon their core values in pursuit of commercial success. How they allegedly neglect the communities that built them. How they allegedly prioritize new audiences over legacy supporters. It touches on deeply rooted historical narratives about who is protected and who is punished, who is elevated and who is discarded. The word gentrification started appearing in conversations about the WNBA, according to reports analyzing fan sentiment. Not gentrification in the literal property sense, but gentrification of culture and narrative. The league was allegedly being cleaned up, allegedly being repackaged, allegedly being altered to appeal to a larger, more affluent, less Black audience. According to sources describing this perspective, the decision to remove Wilson was just the most visible sign of a broader shift that was allegedly already underway. Some argued, according to these reports, that this was the natural evolution of any successful business. That growth meant change. That mainstream appeal meant appealing to mainstream audiences. That the league couldn't remain solely a vehicle for Black women's empowerment and simultaneously expand into a major commercial force. According to these sources, you allegedly had to choose, and the commissioner had chosen growth. But others pushed back against that narrative, according to reports describing alternative perspectives. They argued that the league didn't have to choose between commercial success and loyalty to its roots. They pointed to other sports and industries that had managed to grow while maintaining their cultural identity. According to these sources, the choice to prioritize Clark over Wilson was exactly that, a choice. Not an inevitable consequence of growth, but a deliberate decision that reflected the commissioner's values and vision. The sisterhood narrative that the WNBA had carefully cultivated over the years was effectively destroyed by this decision, according to reports analyzing the league's messaging. For years, the WNBA had positioned itself as different from the NBA, as a place where women supported each other, where the league was a family united by the challenge of building something together, where solidarity mattered more than individual egos or rivalries. That narrative was shattered, according to these reports, the moment the commissioner removed one player to protect another. What this decision revealed, according to sources analyzing the deeper reality beneath the public facade, was that the sisterhood was conditional. It existed when money wasn't a major factor. It persisted when everyone was struggling together. But when millions of dollars and international recognition entered the equation, the sisterhood allegedly collapsed into the same competitive, ruthless dynamics that characterized any other professional sport. The rookie wasn't competing against the veteran. She was competing with her for resources, for attention, for opportunity. And the commissioner, according to reports analyzing her role, had allegedly decided that the veteran would have to make way for the rookie. Not because the rookie was better, but because the rookie represented more money, more growth, more future potential. The cold calculation allegedly underlying this decision was precisely the kind of thing that contradicted everything the WNBA claimed to stand for. According to reports analyzing fan sentiment after the decision, the pain was genuine and explosive, regardless of whether the gentrification angle was intentional or merely a byproduct of commercial considerations. The legacy fans felt betrayed. The community that built the league felt disrespected. The message sent was allegedly clear: you're no longer what matters. What matters is growth. What matters is the future. What matters is reaching audiences that didn't care about your story or your sacrifice. And that message, according to sources describing the broader implications, set a precedent. If the league could come for a Ja Wilson, the reigning MVP and one of the greatest players in WNBA history, then according to these sources, it could theoretically come for anyone. Brittany Griner, Diana Taurasi, Breena Stewart. Any player whose presence allegedly conflicted with the league's new direction could allegedly be removed or marginalized. Championship rings and years of experience might no longer guarantee protection. The league was allegedly entering uncharted territory, according to these reports. They'd made a choice that prioritized the future over the past. They'd sacrificed loyalty for growth. They'd chosen one type of fan over another. And they'd done it with the full knowledge that it would alienate a significant portion of their core audience. According to sources examining the strategic calculation, they were betting that the growth brought by new fans would more than offset the loss of legacy support. They were betting that Caitlin Clark alone could carry women's basketball into the future. The WNBA stands at a crossroads, and the decision to remove a Ja Wilson from Team USA represents far more than a disciplinary action. It's a declaration about the league's future identity and values. According to reports analyzing the fallout, the league has chosen growth over loyalty, chosen mainstream appeal over cultural roots, chosen business calculations over the sisterhood it claimed to embody. Whether that choice proves right or catastrophically wrong remains to be seen, but the damage has allegedly already been done. A Ja Wilson now faces her own crossroads: fight and expose everything, stay silent and attempt rehabilitation, or take her talents elsewhere where she's valued and respected. Caitlin Clark enters a new season wearing a scarlet letter she didn't ask for, blamed for the destruction of league culture she had no role in orchestrating. And the WNBA itself moves forward without its reigning MVP, its greatest recent champion, allegedly betting everything on one rookie to carry the entire league into the future. The question that lingers is whether the league made a decision that will eventually be praised as visionary or condemned as the moment women's basketball lost its soul in pursuit of mainstream success. The coming seasons will allegedly answer that question. But one thing is certain, this moment will be remembered as a turning point. The moment when the WNBA chose its future and abandoned its past.